Welcome back to the U.S. Navy History Podcast. I am Dale, and I'm joined by Krista.
Hello, everyone. Welcome aboard.
Today, we're setting sail into the mystery and meaning of a ship lost beneath the Pacific for more than 8 decades. The USS Hornet, CV-8. She was one of the most storied warships of World War II, known for launching daring strikes, fighting in pivotal battles, and making the ultimate sacrifice in the early crucible of the Pacific War. But for many years, her story seemed to end abruptly on the surface of the sea in October of 1942. Until recent years, when the mysteries of the deep began to surrender their secrets. A wreck discovered far below the South Pacific makes Hornet's story whole again. The USS Hornet was a Yorktown-class aircraft carrier, commissioned into the U.S. Navy in October of 1941. This was a vessel born into conflict. Entering service just weeks before the attack on Pearl Harbor thrust America into World War II. Her crew and the planes she carried would go on to help shape the early phases of the Pacific War. But before we get into that, let's set the scene. The Pacific in early 1942 was a cauldron. Japanese forces were advancing across vast distances. The U.S. carriers, although fewer in number, were America's most potent weapons. Hornet quickly proved her mettle. In April 1942, Hornet launched one of the most audacious raids of the war, the Doolittle Raid.
Ah, that's where I know that name from. The Hornet, okay.
In this bold mission, 16 Army Air Force's B-25 Mitchell bombers took off from the Hornet's flight deck and headed towards Japan, the first American air attack on the Japanese homeland. It was a mission many thought impossible. Medium bombers flying off a Navy carrier hundreds of miles from land. Yet, it succeeded in striking Tokyo and other cities, delivering a psychological shock to Japan and a massive morale boost to the United States. The raid didn't turn the tide of war by itself, but it changed how both sides understood the strategic reach of naval air power. The Hornet didn't rest after the Doolittle Raid. She pressed on into the center of the Pacific War. At the Battle of Midway in June 1942, Hornet's aircraft played a critical role in America's stunning victory over the Japanese carrier force, a battle history now recognizes as the turning point of the Pacific War. And she wasn't done. Later that year, Hornet fought in the bloody and brutal campaign around Guadalcanal,
Wow.
providing air cover, striking Japanese shipping, and helping keep a wary tactical balance in the Solomons. Her service was short but intense, barely a year and 6 days from commission to her last battle. Yet she earned several battle stars for her contribution. In late October 1942, Hornet found herself caught in one of the fiercest carrier battles of the Pacific War, the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands. Japanese aircraft swarmed her decks. Dive bombers and torpedo planes struck with deadly precision. Hornet took multiple bomb hits and torpedo strikes, crippling her. Despite hopes to salvage her, the damage was too severe. Attempts by American destroyers to scuttle the burning carrier were reported to have failed. The ship simply refused to sink. Eventually, Japanese destroyers delivered the fatal blows. In the early hours of October 27, 1942, Hornet went down, the last U.S. fleet carrier lost to enemy action in World War II. Her loss was a heavy blow to the fleet and a sorrowful moment for her crew and families, but her legend was only beginning. For decades, the final resting place of the Hornet was unknown. Sailors lost with her in the deep were long memorialized by those who survived, but the exact location of her wreck remained elusive. That changed in January 2019 when explorers aboard the research vessel RV Petrel, funded by the estate of tech pioneer Paul G. Allen located Hornet's wreck about 5,300 meters, or in American, 17,500 feet, beneath the ocean surface near the Solomon Islands. Using underwater vehicles, the team captured images of the hull and portions of the ship in a remarkable state of preservation, considering her nearly 8 decades on the ocean floor. Finding Hornet wasn't just a waypoint in underwater archaeology. It was a profound moment for naval history. A ship once vibrant with life, sailors, pilots, mechanics, now rests in the quiet dark. It connects us directly to the courage of her crew, the explosive intensity of carrier combat, the strategic pivot points of World War II, and the enduring legacy of those lost at sea. In recent years, museums and new exhibits, including a CV-8 legacy room, featuring recovered artifacts and personal mementos, have helped carry this story forward. So, now we've set the stage from Hornet's birth to her heroic missions, to her descent to the ocean floor. We are ready to dive deeper. Pun definitely intended.
Excellent. I love puns, and I love learning more. You mentioned the name Paul Allen, and he funded the research vessel that discovered the Hornet. And I was like, oh yeah, co-founder of Microsoft. A zillion dollars, metaphorically speaking. And I thought, if I had $1 zillion, funding research vessels sounds like a great thing to do. That would be awesome.
When the USS Hornet slipped beneath the waves in October of 1942, she vanished into one of the most remote and unforgiving stretches of ocean on Earth. There were no coordinates carefully logged, no modern tracking systems, only last known positions, combat reports, and survivor recollections, all filtered through the chaos of battle. For decades, the Pacific kept her secret. The waters around the Solomon Islands are deceptively calm on the surface, but beneath them lies rugged terrain, rivaling mountain ranges on land. Depths plunge more than 3 miles. Underwater currents shift wreckage, and volcanic geology distorts sonar. Hornet did not sink intact into shallow water. She fought, burned, drifted, and then disappeared into darkness. Many historians quietly believed she may never be found. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, the research vessel Petrel, funded by the estate of Paul G. Allen, had one mission: locate historically significant naval wrecks using cutting-edge technology. This was not treasure hunting. This was underwater archaeology. The team studied U.S. and Japanese after-action reports, along with weather data from October 1942. They calculated drift patterns of damaged ships and eyewitness accounts from Hornet survivors. Slowly, a search box emerged. Still massive, but focused. In January 2019, deep-sea autonomous vehicles began scanning the seabed. Hour after hour, nothing. Then, an outline. A long, unmistakable shape resting upright on the ocean floor. The island structure, the flight deck, the hull lines of a Yorktown-class carrier. There was no doubt.
Whoa.
After 77 years, USS Hornet had been found. She rested more than 17,500 feet below the surface. That is deeper than Titanic. Beyond sunlight, beyond sound, beyond reach of ordinary diving. The first video footage stunned historians. She was remarkably intact. her name Hornet still visible on the stern.
Wow.
Anti-aircraft guns still pointed skyward. The hull standing proud, not broken apart. Damage from bomb hits was visible, scars of her final battle, but she had not been torn apart by depth or time. She looked resolute. For many veterans and families, it was the first time the ship had felt real again. The wreck answered long-standing questions. Reports suggested American destroyers failed to sink Hornet despite firing torpedoes. The wreck confirms this. Damage patterns indicate that Japanese destroyer torpedoes finally sent her down, validating survivor accounts once debated by historians. This matters because history is not just dates and outcomes, it is truth earned through evidence. From the beginning, the Petrel team treated Hornet not as an object, but as a war grave. No artifacts were removed, no disturbance was made. The site was documented, then left in peace. This is now Hornet's final watch station. Her crew who did not survive rest with her still. For surviving family members, the discovery was emotional. Some had grown old without ever knowing where their fathers, brothers, or uncles lay. Others had served aboard Hornet themselves, and now saw her one last time, frozen exactly where history left her. One veteran's son reportedly said, quote, "Now I know where my father never came home from." That matters, because ships are steel, but they carry lives. Finding USS Hornet did not change the outcome of World War II, but it changed something else. It closed a chapter that had been left open for nearly 8 decades. It reminded us that the early Pacific War was fought by ships that went into battle, outnumbered, often unsupported, crewed by men still learning how carrier war would be fought. Hornet was one of those ships, and now she has been found.
That's cool. I think this whole story is fascinating because it is important to find this ship and to be a descendant of one of those crewmen that went down, and you're just like, he's somewhere in the Pacific. That's very broad and does not have any closure at all. And so it's significant on that front, just far and away. But I think additionally, like, it's nice to know more facts about what happened. When you said Americans tried to scuttle her with torpedoes and failed, but then the Japanese attacked and then were successful, that kind of adds more questions to me. It's what was the difference? Was it tactics? Was it technology? What did the Japanese have that the Americans didn't? Or did the Americans just weaken the ship, allowing the Japanese to seal the deal? I don't know. And do we scuttle ships with crewmen still on it? Is that a typical thing that we do? Or was it just like, hey, everybody's dead, we got to get rid of the ship? So a lot of questions pop up for me, but I'd like to explore that in this episode.
To understand USS Hornet, you have to step away from the steel and machinery and step into the lives of the men who called her home. Because Hornet was not just a warship. She was a floating city of nearly 2,500 souls.
Whoa.
Pilots, deck crews, gunners, cooks, engineers, most of them young, many of them far from home for the first time. When Hornet was commissioned in October of 1941, her crew had little time to settle in. Within weeks, Pearl Harbor was attacked. Suddenly, training cruises became war patrols. Routine drills became preparation for death. Many sailors later recalled the shock of that transition. One day, learning procedures. The next, realizing they were now frontline combatants in a global war. One enlisted later wrote that the Hornet felt unfinished, not in construction, but in experience. They were learning carrier warfare while fighting it. For the flight crews, Hornet was one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Aircraft engines screamed at full throttle. Fuel vapors hung in the air. Bombs and torpedoes were handled by hand. Every launch carried risk, even without enemy fire. Pilots remembered the strange calm before takeoff, standing beside their aircraft as the deck pitched beneath them. knowing that once launched, there might not be a deck to return to. And yet they climbed aboard anyway, because someone had to. Nowhere was that courage more evident during the Doolittle raid. Those Army pilots were not carrier aviators. Most had never taken off from a ship before. Hornet's crew watched as 16 B-25 bombers, aircraft never meant for carrier operations, were lined up on the deck. There was no margin for error. Sailors lined the deck rails, silent, watching each bomber roar into the air, carrying men they knew would almost certainly not return. One deckhand later recalled thinking, "We were sending them into history, and we knew it." That moment bonded the crew to the mission and to the war itself. After Midway, Hornet moved into the grinding reality of the Solomon Island campaign. This was not a single dramatic strike. It was weeks of tension. Sleep came in short bursts. General quarters sounded constantly. Enemy aircraft could appear without warning. And sailors learned to live with fear. Not panic, but a steady awareness that the next alarm might be the last. Veterans later said that the waiting was often worse than the fighting. On the morning of the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, Hornet's crew went to general quarters knowing what was coming. Radar contacts appeared. Aircraft were launched and guns were manned. Then the Japanese attack broke through. Dive bombers streamed down. Torpedo planes skimmed the waves. Hornet was hit again and again. Explosions rocked the ship. Fire spread through the hangar decks. Electrical power failed. And still, the crew fought. Damage control teams worked in smoke, darkness, and heat. They carried hoses through wreckage. They dragged wounded shipmates to safety. They sealed compartments while fires burned on the other side of the bulkhead. Some men never made it out. Others kept working even after being injured. One survivor later said, "We weren't thinking about saving the ship. We were thinking about saving each other." Eventually, the order came: abandon ship. For sailors, this is the moment every training drill leads towards, and hopes never comes. Men climbed down lines into oil-covered water. Some were wounded, some were exhausted. Some looked back one last time at the ship they had lived on for a year. Hornet was still floating, burning, silent, refusing to die. And then they were gone. Of the Hornet's crew, many survived, rescued by escorting ships, but 140 men were lost. Their bodies never recovered. For their families, there were no grave. No place to visit, only telegrams and folded flags, until the wreck was found. When we talk about ships, it is easy to focus on strategy and steel. But wars are fought by people, often young people, who do extraordinary things under impossible pressure. The story of the USS Hornet is their story. And now, with the ship found on the ocean floor, their sacrifices have a place in the physical world once again.
I think it is so historically significant to find this ship, to know more about this ship. Ever since I heard about the Doolittle raid and the really ostentatious nature of that mission, it's incredible. Knowing that America was willing to put it all on the line in order to send a message to Japan in response to Pearl Harbor, it means a lot to me, really, as an American. I do admire the bravery of the crew that performed that mission, that were lost, just because, like you said, that sailor knew they were sending these guys into history. It wasn't, this will be a milk run, no problem. Every day was something extremely dangerous, and only a year. It was only around for a year, this ship, and all the conflicts it was involved with a crew that was just learning how to use aircraft carrier tactics. That is mind-blowing. You know that most of the crewmen, I'm sure, were probably late teens, early 20s, overwhelming majority. And they're just having to learn how to operate this giant hulk of a ship against a well-prepared and numerically superior enemy, and they still did it. That's awesome. And when you get the signal for abandoned ship, this is a question I have for you, and I think I've asked it in the past, but I don't quite remember. Jumping off of the deck of a carrier is something you trained for, right? That's a high dive.
First of all, you don't jump from the deck of the aircraft carrier.
Okay.
You're going to be from the flight deck.
Oh.
If you jump from the flight deck, you're not surviving that.
Okay. So,
and yes,
how would
you
work? Like, what do you do?
When you are at general quarters, you have your battle dress, which compromises your gas mask.
Okay.
Maybe not in 42, but definitely modern times when chemical warfare is a distinct possibility. You also have your personal flotation device. Everybody has one. And during basic training, you are taught how to jump into the water. There is a very high platform that mimics the hangar bay height from the water.
Okay.
And everybody jumps from there.
That's nuts.
And they teach you how to properly jump from there and enter the water to not cause injury to yourself. They also teach you how to use your pants as a flotation device.
Your pants?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. We'll get into that later, I think. But I do want to say that, so there's a bunch of 2,500 souls on the ship. And they're all told to, those that have not passed away already, told to abandon ship. They do. Mm-hmm. And now there's just a crowd, a town's worth of people in an oily, slick ocean around a burning ship. That's terrifying. You paint a vivid picture, and I think it really brings the reality of what happened to this ship home. I know that's what ultimately sailors sign up for. This is a possibility of how this will go. But that's very impressive.
Abandoned ship is the most terrifying order that you could ever hear.
I imagine. Yeah, because battle stations, you know what to do. You train all the time for that. And you know your job, you do it. Abandoned ship just seems like organized chaos. Everybody's going to the hangar bay to jump in the water. And then not knowing what's going to happen next, right? Like you might get picked up, you might not. Who knows? The enemy's still right there.
It's not organized chaos. It's organized. There is no chaos. Abandoned ship drills are a drill that we do.
Yeah, I guess I should have figured that was the case. And I should have given the Navy more credit and not just assume people going everywhere. No, it's disciplined. We've told enough stories about engagements and how both seamen and officers act under duress. So, apologies to you and any Navy personnel that may be listening.
By the morning of October 26, 1942, both sides of the Pacific understood something had changed. The war was no longer about quick victory or surprise raids. It is now a war of attrition, fought by ship, crew by crew. And on that morning, USS Hornet sailed directly into its most violent test. The Battle of Santa Cruz Islands was part of a wider struggle for Guadalcanal. American and Japanese naval forces were circling one another. Each side, trying to protect its supply lines, had denied the other control of the air. The United States had 2 carriers in the area, Hornet and Enterprise. Japan had 4. The odds were not in Hornet's favor, but backing away was not an option. Just after dawn, radar operators aboard Hornet detected incoming aircraft. Within minutes, the ship went to general quarters. Pilots scrambled to their planes. Anti-aircraft guns were manned. Damage control teams stood by. Above the ship, the sky filled with American fighters racing to intercept the attackers. But not all of them could be stopped. Japanese dive bombers broke through. They came in steep, screaming dives, a sound survivors would later say they never forgot. The first bomb struck the flight deck and hangar deck almost simultaneously. Explosions tore through aircraft, fuel lines, and ammunition. Fire spread fast. Moments later, torpedo planes attacked from low altitude. 2 torpedoes slammed into Hornet's starboard side. The ship shuddered violently. Power failed. Steering was lost. Hornet slowed, then stopped. She was wounded, but not dead. What followed was one of the most remarkable episodes of ship survival in U.S. Navy history. Despite catastrophic damage, Hornet stayed afloat. Damage control parties fought fires for hours. Men passed hoses hand to hand. They carried wounded through smoke-filled passageways. They flooded magazines to prevent explosions. At one point, it appeared Hornet might be saved. A tow line was rigged. USS Northampton attempted to pull her clear. For a brief moment, hope returned. Then, more Japanese aircraft arrived. Another attack shattered that hope. Additional bomb hits reignited fighters. The tow was broken and flooding worsened. Hornet was once again motionless, burning from stem to stern. By late afternoon, the decision became unavoidable. The ship could not be saved. The order to abandon ship was passed quietly. There was no panic. Men climbed down nets into the sea. Some helped wounded shipmates. Others carried nothing but their memories. As the last survivors pulled away, Hornet still floated, battered, silent, defiant. American destroyers attempted to scuttle the carrier to prevent capture. Torpedoes were fired. They hit, but astonishingly, Hornet still did not sink. It was as if the ship refused to die. Finally, under cover of darkness, Japanese destroyers closed in. They fired multiple torpedoes. Only then did USS Hornet finally slip beneath the waves. She sank shortly after midnight on October 27th, 1942. Hornet's loss was deeply felt. She had been in commission just over a year. She had launched the first strike on Japan. She had fought at Midway, and she held the line at Guadalcanal. But now, she was gone. But she had not been defeated cheaply. Japanese losses were heavy. American resolve hardened, and the war went on. The Battle of Santa Cruz Islands was technically a Japanese tactical victory, but strategically it changed little. What mattered was that the United States could replace ships, and Japan could not replace trained air crews. Hornet's sacrifice bought time, and time would decide the war.
I gotta tell you, from an engineering perspective, the fact that it was so tough to sink the Hornet is amazing. Whoever designed that aircraft carrier and put it together, hats off to you, because trying to put out fire for hours and then calling abandoned ship and then trying to sink it with torpedoes and it's still not sinking, that's incredible. I will say, I'm surprised the Japanese sunk her anyway. I'm trying to think what tactical advantage there would be to sinking a ship that's already crippled and abandoned. Would it be okay to just let it burn? Or is there a possibility that support ships could come in and recover it?
We don't have that information, but at a educated guess, I would say that they probably surveyed what was going on with her and felt that she would not be able to be... There was no point to capturing her.
But you still don't...
They would not have gained information from her. It probably would have, at that time, created a navigational hazard to their own fleets.
Yeah. And you don't want to leave it up for the Americans to recover. Okay. I'm just always curious about why certain decisions are made over others. Man, what a tough bucket. You know what I mean? That's incredible. And then, yeah, if we can get more of those into, just deployed into action, yeah, that seals the fate of an under-industrialized Japan. Or under-resourced, also.
When USS Hornet slipped beneath the waves in October of 1942, she became something more than a warship. She became a memory. For decades, that memory lived on only in documents, photographs, and the recollections of the men who served aboard her. Now, with her resting place finally known, Hornet's legacy feels closer, heavier, and more personal. By any measure, Hornet's service life was brief, just over a year from commissioning to loss. But in that short span, she was present at some of the most consequential moments of the early Pacific War. Again, she launched the first American strikes in Japan. She fought in the battle that broke Japan's carrier strength at Midway, and she stood the line at Guadalcanal when the outcome of the war was still uncertain. Few ships did so much in so little time. Hornet's career illustrates how quickly naval warfare was changing. When she was designed, battleships were still considered the backbone of the fleet. By the time she was lost, aircraft carriers had proven that they were the decisive weapons of the Pacific. Hornet and her sisters paid the price for that transition. They fought without decades of doctrine behind them. They fought while tactics were still being written, often in blood. Their experience shaped how carriers would be used for the rest of the war. Hornet's influence did not sink with her. Survivors went on to serve aboard other ships, carriers, cruisers, destroyers, carrying with them hard-earned lessons about damage control, air defense, and survival under fire. Some later said that everything they learned aboard Hornet made them better sailors and better leaders later in the war. Her legacy lived on in the fleet itself. The discovery of Hornet's wreck transformed memory into place. She is no longer just a name in a book. She lies upright on the seabed, a silent witness to her own story. For families, that knowledge matters. It means that loved ones are not lost to history, only to the sea. For historians, the wreck provides confirmation, clarity, and connection. And for the Navy, it is a reminder of what service at sea has always required. Hornet was not the only carrier lost in 1942, but her story resonates because of when and how she fought. She fought when defeat was possible. She fought when experience was limited. And she fought when courage had to make up for uncertainty. Her loss was not in vain. The war continued. The fleet grew stronger. Victory followed. But that victory was built on ships like Hornet and crews like hers. When we tell Hornet's story, not because she was perfect, but because she was brave. Not because she survived, but because she did not. Naval history is not just about triumphs, it is about endurance, sacrifice, and leaning under fire. Hornet represents all three.
I think that is an important thing to reflect on from not just a historical perspective, but a military one. And if you're unable to derive lessons from your defeats, there's no way you'll be successful in any campaign. You can go back to the Carthaginian triumphs over Rome again and again, and Rome getting afraid of Carthage. But what they did is they learned the strategies. They learned new tactics. They eventually were able to push back. And then by the time that was over, they were the dominant military force in the region. Losing a ship is always difficult and hard and not the preferred outcome of any navy. But I'm sure that so many lessons were learned at this moment, at losing the Hornet, that they were able to come back and say, okay, the Hornet has graced us with so many battle victories in this very long campaign. What can we do to honor her by reflecting on how she was defeated and then not make those mistakes again? So that defeat not only bought time, but bought intelligence, bought strategy that helped ultimately defeat the Japanese. And that's incredible.
By the end of 1942, the United States Navy understood something painful and unavoidable. Victory in the Pacific would come, but it would not come cheaply. USS Hornet was not lost in isolation. She was part of a pattern, a brutal learning curve that reshaped how America fought wars at sea. In 1942, the U.S. Navy was still fighting with a fleet designed for a different kind of war. Battleships were meant to decide engagements. Carriers were still proving themselves. Radar was new. air defense doctrine was incomplete. The result was a year of staggering losses. The USS Lexington at Coral Sea, the USS Yorktown at Midway, USS Wasp near Guadalcanal, and USS Hornet at Santa Cruz. 4 fleet carriers lost in a single year. Each loss was a shock, but also a lesson. Hornet's loss reinforced hard truths. Carriers were powerful, but fragile. Air defense had to improve fast. Damage control saved lives, but needed doctrine, not improvisation. The Navy learned that carriers must operate with stronger fighter screens, better radar coordination, and layered anti-aircraft fire. These lessons were written into training manuals and into the designs of the next generation of ships. One of the most important lessons of 1942 had nothing to do with ships. It had to do with people. Japanese won tactical victories, but lost irreplaceable pilots. At Santa Cruz, Japanese aircrews suffered devastating losses. Hornet was sunk, but Japanese carrier aviation never fully recovered. The United States, by contrast, expanded training pipelines, rotated veterans into instructor roles, and built a system designed to absorb losses. Hornet's sacrifice bought time and allowed experience to grow. By 1943, the carrier war looked very different. New Essex-class carriers entered service. Anti-aircraft fire became denser and more coordinated. Damage control doctrine matured. The Navy that went into the war in 1942 was not the Navy that returned in 1945. And that transformation was paid for by ships like Hornet. Each carrier lost in 1942 carried its own story, its own crew, its own moment of sacrifice. But together they form a single narrative. A Navy learning under fire, a nation adapting at speed, a war decided not by a single battle, but by persistence. Hornet's story fits squarely within that arc. She did not survive to see victory, but she helped make it possible. When we look at Hornet's wreck on the seafloor, we are not just seeing a single ship. We are seeing a moment in time when the outcome of the war was uncertain, when courage mattered more than certainty, and when lessons were paid for in lives. That wreck reminds us that dominance is never inherited. It is earned.
That's one thing I didn't realize until you mentioned it, but makes all the sense in the world, is if you rotate out your veterans, not only do you give them a rest, but you're able to utilize their experience and really share that with incoming troops. So what you end up with is a much less brittle service. And I don't want to make too many assumptions of the Imperial Japanese mindset, but they seem very aggressive, right? Like their mentality is go in hard and just conquer. And so as a result, you're going to have some ships, some pilots, some groups that are very skilled, very experienced, but you don't rotate them out because why would you remove your greatest asset, your best weapon for training? That seems foolish because you're not going to be able to conquer objectives as quickly. But the reverse of that is if you lose those guys, you are set back in a huge way. It creates a very unbalanced military force. And I know that they had resource constraints and stuff, and building zeros was a very manual process, so even losing planes was difficult, but that experience is irreplaceable. And if you have a strategy that is so hyper-aggressive that causes you to lose sight of that long-term strategy because you think, hey, I'm so good, I'm just going to keep winning, when you lose big. And so it was very wise of the Americans to not only learn lessons from defeats like the Hornet, but to have a more long-term view. Well, how do we make sure we can get as many guys up to speed as possible in this brand new form of warfare that we're still trying to figure out? And that one decision probably made all the difference in the war.
There's something profoundly final about the ocean floor. No noise, no motion, only time. And there, more than 3 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific, rests USS Hornet, CV-8, exactly where history left her. The images of Hornet's wreck show a ship still recognizable, her hull upright, her flight deck intact, her name still visible on the stern. She does not look defeated. She looks finished. For sailors, this matters. Ships are not just tools, they are companions. They are places where friendships form, fear is shared, and duty becomes personal. Hornet was not abandoned in failure. She was left only after giving everything she had. The rediscovery of USS Hornet did not rewrite history, but it completed it. For decades, her final moments existed only in reports and memories. Now they exist in place. Her wreck confirms the stories told by survivors. It validates long-debated accounts of her final hours. And it gives weight, literal weight, to the sacrifice made aboard her decks. For families, this matters deeply. Knowing where a loved one rests, even beneath miles of water, brings a form of closure no document ever could. The Navy that emerged from World War II was shaped by ships like Hornet. It learned to fight carriers properly. It learned the value of layered defense. It learned that air crews mattered as much as hulls. And it learned that adaptability, not perfection, wins wars. Hornet belonged to the Navy that learned those lessons the hard way. There are ships that win great victories. There are ships that make those victories possible. Hornet was the second kind. She held the line when the line was thin. She struck when striking mattered most. She absorbed losses when replacement was uncertain. Her story reminds us that history does not always turn on survival, but on contribution. Today, USS Hornet keeps a different kind of watch. No flight operations, no general quarters, no alarms. Just silence and memory. She rests alongside the men who never left her. And as long as her story is told, they are not forgotten. The USS Hornet, CV-8, served briefly, fought fiercely, and gave her life at a moment when the future of the Pacific War was still undecided. Her discovery reminds us that history is not gone. It waits patiently beneath the waves.
I'm glad there was closure. I'm surprised the ship was upright when it was on the ocean floor, but I guess I shouldn't be. I just always assume that all shipwrecks are flat, sideways, you know what I mean? But I don't know. I've never been in a position where my loved ones, I didn't know what happened to them, or I didn't know where they ended up, or I knew that they were involved in something far away and they met their end, but now, who knows? The broad unknown ocean has now consumed them. That's not something I've had to deal with, but I can imagine, at least try to get close to imagining what that must be like. And knowing that your loved one has been found is significant. And I'm impressed with how they found it. They went through the logs. They researched this conflict. They found the search zone. They searched for hours, days, weeks, and then found it. And all that effort, all that money, all those resources to do that brought such relief to so many families. And I think that's what a great use of money. What a great use of time to help close wounds that have been open for decades. I think that's significant. And also to rediscover a piece of history. Again, the Doolittle raid to me is so psychologically significant to America that knowing that we've rediscovered her is incredible. I'm sad that we lost so many good sailors. I'm glad we were able to recover them.
So we're going to end the episode like we do every episode by honoring one of our fallen angels. And today we're going to honor Pharmacist mate, second class, Vito Thomas Accardi. Born in Brooklyn, New York, served with the U.S. Navy on the USS Eversole, DE-404. He received the Navy and Marine Corps Medal and a Purple Heart. His date of sacrifice was October 29th, 1944. Killed in action in the Leyte Gulf off Samar Island, Philippine Sea. We do not know how old he was. Vito Thomas Accardi from Brooklyn, New York, served as a pharmacist mate, second class, aboard the USS Eversole, DE-404, in the Pacific Theater of World War II. He took part in the battle for Leyte Gulf in the Philippine Sea, the largest Navy battle of the war, involving more than 200,000 naval personnel. This battle was also the first time American forces would witness organized Japanese aircraft kamikaze attacks. Author Wilford P. Deck, in the December 1966 issue of American Heritage, writes, "The overall battle for Leyte Gulf, spread across a total area twice the size of Texas, was the greatest sea fight in history. Every element of naval warfare, from submarine to aircraft, was involved. And when it was over, the Imperial Japanese Navy had ceased to exist as a fighting unit. The United States and our allies had undisputed control of the Pacific Ocean." During the battle on October 29th, 1944, 2 torpedoes fired from the Japanese submarine I-45, commanded by Kawashima Moro, punched into the side of the USS Eversole. Eversole's Lieutenant Commander George E. Marks gave the order to abandon ship. As the Eversole quickly sank and the surviving crew dropped into the Philippine Sea, Accardi hurried to rescue crew members trapped in a damaged compartment. Quote, "We had some casualties from the torpedo hits, and the heroic efforts of the able men made to get the wounded to safety were magnificent," said Lieutenant Commander Marks. "I saw Accardi, who was paying no attention to his own safety, get at least 3 men who were wounded out of a compartment." Petty Officer Accardi went down with the ship. For his selfless bravery, Accardi was posthumously awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal. His citation reads, "The President of the United States of America takes pride in presenting the Navy and Marine Corps Medal posthumously to Pharmacist Mate Second Class Vito Thomas Accardi, Naval Serial Number 8147551, United States Navy, for outstanding heroism and devotion to duty in assisting wounded men from a damaged compartment of the USS Eversole, DE-404, after it had been hit by 2 submarine torpedoes. When the USS Eversole was seriously damaged and sinking from enemy submarine torpedoes on 29 October 1944, during the Second Naval Battle of the Philippine Sea, Petty Officer Accardi immediately realized that the ship was sinking, and the wounded men must be removed from the damaged compartment. Although suffering from shock and despite the immediate sinking of the ship, Petty Officer Accardi carried wounded men out of the compartment until he himself was trapped and went down with the ship. Due to Petty Officer Accardi's self-sacrifice, many men were saved who otherwise would have perished. The courage, judgment, and devotion to duty displayed by Petty Officer Accardi reflects great credit on the United States Naval Service." So, Pharmacist Mate Second Class Vito Thomas Accardi, we thank you.
Thank you.
All right, get us out of here.
All right, Captain. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I enjoy history. I enjoy learning things. I enjoy talking to Dale. We could do that on a front porch somewhere, and you wouldn't be there, or maybe some of you might be. I don't know. But being able to share this with y'all is cool. And you show up, and you listen, and you give us your time, which I really appreciate. If you hear something that piques your interest or something you want to give feedback on, maybe you have relatives that served on the Hornet and you want to reach out and say, hey, discovering it, this is what the impact was on our family, let us know. There's a couple different ways you can do that. You can email us. Our email address is usnavyhistorypodcast@gmail.com. We're also on X Twitter. Our handle is USNHistoryPod. And if you look in the show notes, you'll find those 2 things there. You'll also find our Discord server where you can join up and talk to us and other listeners. So feel free to do that if you are so inclined. again, thanks for listening. If you feel so moved, rate and review us. Let us know what you like. Tell a friend, tell a coworker, family member, everybody you care about. Just say, hey, you like history. You like the Navy. So do I. Listen to this. And hopefully they will. Because your recommendations are great, right? All right. Thanks again. And we hope to catch you next time.
With that, we're going to wish you guys fair winds and following seas. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.